Man, I forgot the logo. Hold on, guys. Hold on. Oh no, we don't have our logo. How can we possibly have our show if we don't have our sploosh? There we go. All right, ready? Sploosh. There we go. It wouldn't be the pro tips if it wasn't with the sploosh. We have to have the sploosh. Hi guys, good morning. Welcome to day 2 of ReaperCon, everybody. This is your host, Ann Foerster. Sorry for the slight delay. I almost forgot to take my vitamins this morning. Vitamins are very important. At least I believe so. So here we are. Second day sploosh. Yep, we had to have the sploosh. Are we doing giveaways today, Justin?
No, we're not.
No giveaways. They start on... Do they start... Aren't we good?
We're doing hourly giveaways through the Discord,
through...
I believe.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, so we're going to cook the whole column.
Okay, cool. Hold on, guys. I had to put Justin in my ear so he's not Justin from the grave. There we are. All right, Justin is safely in my ear. You are all now protected from his undead menace. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, see, a reminder about vitamins. Take your vitamins, especially if you're at the convention. Even if you're virtually at the convention. So yeah. Oh, Scotty, I said to say hi. Aw, she's such a sweetheart. She's such a sweetie. I hope she's been catching some of our programming, but I know she's busy. Artists are always busy. Alrighty, yes, ReaperCon. Alright, Kiri, it's time to settle down now. It's time to settle. Alright, what are we working on today? I was gonna work. Hey, good morning. Alright. So I was gonna work on Dead Guy, but then Dead Guy's priming job kind of got fraught with peril yesterday, and he just wasn't really working. So I was like, alright, we will do our shipwreck bust instead. Maybe I'll start blocking in the pink, and maybe a bit up here. I think I'm gonna make... I know her bodice is going to be dark, so I need to decide on a color for this. Yeah, I got to prevent the con crud, even if it's not, like, actually in-person con crud. Tell David and Kiri hi too, yes. Yes, indeed. This has actually been a pretty cool con experience. Like, it's weird, but definitely, like, sit at the painting tables, guys. Like, I know you're all probably gaming and learning because you can watch everything, right? But seriously, like, just hanging out at the painting tables kind of feels like ReaperCon hanging out at the painting tables. Because normally you don't hang out online with these people except at ReaperCon, right? So it's kind of fun that way. We hung out with Bryce yesterday, and then we hung out with One Boot. And it was awesome. So, yes, this is indeed the ship's figurehead from Bones 5. I figured it also might make a better piece to work on today since, although it is not a ReaperCon model, it is something that I think only I have a copy of. So it is unique. Ooh. Awesome. Yeah. I don't want to get a computer virus, right? Exactly. Hey, logic doesn't have to come into it any more than it has to. So what we've got, let's see, here's our ancient oak, here's our greens, in case you want to, like, show the greens off for anybody. I assume there's a lot of new people in the stream, since, you know, we've been clocking slightly higher numbers for ReaperCon. So yeah, this is the ship's figurehead. This is the one that comes with the boat, I believe. And what I've been doing to it is I've been putting a weathering effect on it, which would normally happen in the case, you know, they were painted with oil paints. I did a lot of research on this before I started the figure. And then as time went on and the waves and the salt and the, you know, wind beat at the paint, it would slowly wear off. And so what we're doing here is we're painting the base coat on, and then we are wearing off at the front of the figurehead where the water would be crashing against it. And it'll be more worn off toward the bottom, less worn off toward the top. So let's get her in focus. Let's get her zoomed in so you guys can see the detailing. There we go. Now we can see it. So, hey, Paradoxical Mouse, you have a fantastic name. And Jedi Jared, thanks for the resub. But thank you for the prime sub, Paradoxical Mouse. So this is what we've been doing. And I really like weathering effects. I became convinced that weathering effects were my secret love after Kirill did his class for us at Reaper. So I've been studying about how the paint looks when it starts to wear off when in this particular circumstance. So what you essentially get is you get a fading out because the green will go a bit translucent, because it's oil paint, right? It's a little bit see-through. So first it goes a little translucent, and then it starts to, like, flake off, you know, wear off to where you can see the wood grain kind of coming through. And then it eventually comes all the way off. And usually they were done in oak or another hardwood, so it was pretty much a pale wood. Although some were done in mahogany, which is slightly darker. But then you'd get it totally wearing after you got that little bit of brown showing through. You'd get it down to the white, and it would just start really leaching off along with the wood grain. So when you do this pattern, you want to keep it in the direction of the wood grain. And luckily, Chris Lewis, who did this beautiful sculpt in the first place, has sculpted wood grain onto the model. So you don't have to paint all the wood grain. You just have to like leave it there in the shadows. You know, make sure you've got a line on it or something to show it. Hey, Muse's Touch. Awesome. Hello. Oh, thanks. Emles? M-L-E-S? Less. Thank you. I'm glad you love my streams. Thank you so much. So yeah, so that's what we're doing today. I figured I would actually put on her pink petticoat as well, because I'm trying to work out the colors on this mini. Originally, I was going to go with a cream for down here, but then I realized that because my wood color is also a cream, it meant that all the weathering effects wouldn't really show up. So instead, I decided to kind of look at historical figureheads, and they often used like a pink or a red. And the cool thing about that is that when the red leaches off, it goes pink, and then it stays red, like back where it's more sheltered. So it would let me do that cool fade effect up here. And then she's got the little ties down there that I could paint a different color, maybe black. They would have done details, you know, to have them stand out. And then I just have to decide what I'm doing with this shirt up here, which I haven't. Actually, probably the most traditional thing that I've seen is when figureheads are painted in green, they'll often have a dark green and a light green. So I may go with a lighter green up here because I don't have to worry as much about showing my weathering effects, because the weathering isn't going to be as pronounced as it gets up higher on the figurehead. The waves are mostly beating lower down on the figure. So we could go with a lighter green here, and then we could go with, originally I was going with a dark blue, I was thinking, for the bodice. So we can do that today. I actually accidentally ran into an amazing pink the other day when I was mixing colors for skin tones. So I'm going to try to reproduce that because I really liked the color. And it's a mixture of two weird things. It's a mixture of bright skin shadow, which some of you know is one of my favorite kind of skin shading accenting tones, and Asmodeus red, which is a Pathfinder red that is absolutely becoming one of my favorite reds in the entire line. Awesome. Welcome, Static Overdrive. Fantastic. Ah, you made it because you're on that. I wondered about that one, Tusi. Yes, good. Just checking in, make sure that we've got no extremely... Yeah, exactly. I'm trying for realism, Coos. And Coos knows because they're always on my streams, but I love realism in painting. It's one of those things that I like. I like more subtle effects. I like more realistic effects. I'm less about cartoony and eye-popping and anime, which is great, right? All artists, all miniatures artists tend to develop their own specific style, and it varies across artists. You know, if you look at me next to Rex Grange or Ian, we're going to look very different. Or me next to, like David, my boyfriend. David's got like this incredible lighting effect thing going on all the time. And I tend to focus more on micro details. So it's like we tackle figures in very different ways, which is super awesome. When you're in a relationship and you're both good miniature painters and you're both looking at each other's stuff going, oh. So yeah. Yeah, so that's looking really good. Yeah, micro details, all about it, Minxlet. Super. So welcome, new people. I do this show every day for Reaper, every weekday, sorry. And we do a whole bunch of different stuff. And actually, let me take a second and just show off some of the stuff we've been working on, because I actually have some of the stuff we've been working on. So let us see. So we've got Rock Troll. Let's back up just a little bit so we can show some of the bigger figures. So we were definitely working on Pirate Girl. But then we also have been working on Rock Troll, and we did like gemstone on him. I still need to do a lot more gemstones. We kind of did a dramatic lighting effect with him, so I have extreme shadows like down here. We kind of went over that. So we've been doing his skin slowly and working on crystals and stuff. He is one of the first ever Bones Black models, and he's really an awesome model. So definitely, yeah, this is Troll Flesh. I was using Dungeon Dwellers paints all on him, guys. So everything on him is one of the Dungeon Dwellers paints that comes out in the little boxes. The Pirate Girl Rat Mastery is actually the ship's figurehead from the giant pirate ship from Bones 5, which is our Kickstarter that is currently, we're working on fulfilling it. So it'll be fulfilled by next year. So this is the one that actually comes with the boat. I think you can get them separately as well. She is, as you can see, a massive figure. I think I don't know if I actually measured her, and I'm not sure where my millimeters ruler went. I think David ate it. But I might have another one over here. Hold on. Yeah, so if I put her on the millimeters scale, she is almost 150 millimeters. So she is very, very large. Yeah, and I should say the previous streams from this show, by the way, where I first started on this and explained a lot of the history of it and everything, are VODs, and you can also catch them on YouTube. You can get them separate, good. So they come, the ship's figurehead, this one comes with the ship, but then we've also got, Kiri, settle down, please. We've also got a hippocampus and a Grim Reaper that comes with the ship. So yeah, other models we've worked on, we were working on Troll, we were working on Juliana, and we did the stripy dress and all of this. Pretty much everything that has been done on this model, from the weathered skin to the bleached out sun highlights and the brown hair to everything that we've done on this miniature, to the NMM sickle, this has all been done on this stream. So if you guys go back, you can watch the whole thing. Yeah, Rock Trolls is very charismatic on camera because that dramatic lighting effect really takes over, right? So then the other thing, speaking of lighting effects that we've done, we grab all my guys. Here we are. So we work on a different thing every few days pretty much, and I go back and forth between these projects as we slowly finish them. So that way people who didn't maybe see the start of a project get to see later on. So Snake Lady is almost done. I've been sculpting scenery, green stuff scenery on her base, as you can see. So I'm finishing that up, and then I'm going to add some jungle plants and a water effect. And we're going to be doing a lot of that on stream. So, yeah, Snake Lady is fantastic. She also has a lighting effect. She's very nice. I need to touch up her tail a bit, but otherwise she's got a very dramatic effect. I need to also finish up some of her shaded NMM. So a lot of this stuff, like I said, we go back to, we finish a little bit, then we go to a different figure so people don't get bored. And then the other one that I've been working on recently is Fire Giant with his big magma sword. So he's a huge project. So I've been trying to kind of not work on him too much because he could easily take up an entire week. Hold on, Grexian. Actually, I think I might... Do I have a brush command here? So I've got two brushes that I use main. So let's put down Fire Giant. Grab my other brush that I always use. There are two brands and two specific brushes that I use for pretty much everything in my world, Grexian. I am a big Vinci Maestro fan. These are both Kolinsky Sable. And you're going to see the word Kolinsky on their barrel for that reason. Kolinsky is the highest grade of red sable, so it is the absolute top notch. You're going to pay between 10 and 20 bucks per brush, but they last you for years, and they always keep a razor tip. Like both of these brushes, like this brush is at least 4 years old, and I can do like eyeballs with this gigantic brush. It's that good. Same with this one, is at least 3 years old. So Vinci Maestro, and that one, the series is 10, which is their standard round. And the size is 1. Actually, they're both 1s. And then this is the Raphael, and the series is 8408, which I think is the finer tip. And then it also is a size 1. So these are the brushes that I use for everything, including eyeballs, even though they look big. I very seldom, but sometimes, will reach for a smaller brush, like a really micro brush. I've been playing with my DaVinci 000. It's also a series 10. Same thing, DaVinci Maestro. But it's a very small brush. What I find though is that I get more mileage often out of the bigger brushes because they'll hold more moisture in their bristles, and so they enable my paint to stay wet for a longer time. So that's the size progression, so you can see. Yeah, it's an 84. Actually, it's an 84. It's an 8408, not an 8404 with the Raphael. I like the pointier tip. It's a really, really narrow tip. Yeah, wrong channel, right? Yes, exactly. So, Windsor Newton Series 7 size 0. Yeah, I should bring that up. As far as my DaVinci Maestro here, the Windsor and Newton, if you have Windsor Newton's Series 7, the regular series, it should be almost exactly the same size and shape as my DaVinci Maestro. So you can also go with that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, no biggie, Rixion. They're very similar. I think that one just has a more narrow tip and one has a bit of a fuller body. But don't quote me on that, because I only have the 8408. I picked these up at a show, actually at ReaperCon, because we used to have Hangar 18, and they brought them, and I'm like, well, I'll give it a try. And then I only just started really using it this year, and I am really into this brush now, so I'm going to have to get more. Yeah, you can get them at Blick, dickblick.com. Absolutely. No, finding them locally, guys, is usually a bad deal anyway, in my opinion. I mean, you get to look at the brush before you buy it, but if you order from Dick Blick or any reputable art site, even Amazon with the Windsor & Newton Series 7, if the brush comes and it's broke, like the bristles are real splayed, or it just doesn't work very well, and obviously has suffered shipping problems, they will replace your brush, like, free. And so they've got a great guarantee on that. And the nice thing is you save a lot more money online generally than you will in an art store. An art store has to mark it up. So they're going to be selling it for 18 to 24, where you can get it online for maybe 15. So you're going to save more money by ordering on Dick Blick. Usually I say support your local brick and mortar store, but often they won't even order these in because they're such a high ticket item and they don't really sell them. So they may be able to special order for you if you want to support your local store. Yeah, Hanger 18's no longer in business, Dr. Bob. Tori got too busy with his other stuff, and so did Liliana, so they ended up selling out their stock last year, which completely ran me out of hundreds of dollars because everything was on sale. DeSera's in Canada, but they're out of stock. Yeah, Kolinsky Sable brushes can be, like, unpredictable as far as in stock, out of stock. So either way, I go for either Da Vinci or for Raphael. Either are good. The Winsor Newton Series 7... I've had differing experiences with them over the years, which is why I don't currently use them, but David uses them, and he gets great results with his size 0 and other sizes, so definitely also endorse the Winsor Newton Series 7, not the miniature. Not the miniature. The miniature Series 7 is not for painting miniatures, it's actually a wedge shape, so it's a little bit different. Yes, you were less wealthy after that. Yeah, me too. How big a difference between size 0 and the 8.4 and 8? That I have no idea, because this is the only Raphael I use, Coops. So I really have nothing for comparison. I would expect significant. Usually a 0 to a 1, there is a fairly significant size reduction, or size induction, you know what I mean, size difference. But yeah, so I'm not a Raphael expert. I am more of a series, I'm more of a Da Vinci Maestro girl in the past. For many, many, many years, like we're talking over 20 years, my competition go-to brush for painting competition minis was this. And I've gone through infinite numbers of them. I usually, if I'm painting full-time, it will take me 6 months to wear one of these down. But lately, like I said, this has really gotten me, so I may actually finally switch over and use a different brush for competition painting. So, yes, but then there's Fire Giant. And there we go. So now we can get back to the actual things of painting. Right, but yeah, keeping cool things in frame is always good. But yeah, so Fire Giant we've been working on a lot of non-metallic metal on him. We did his little shoulder badge there, and showed how to make the details come out on it because it's sculpted very flat. You know, we've done the magma sword, which we still have to work on. We have a lot of work to do on Fire Giant. So he will periodically make an appearance on the show in the coming weeks. And Rock Troll I want to get back to also and do some more work on him. So that's why I like to have several models I'm working on for the show. So let's make our pink and see how it looks next to this dark green. Painting? Yeah, I know, Pewter Rooster, right? So I'm going to try to mix the pink that I made the other day, which was actually a Bright Skin Shadow and Asmodeus Red. And as I recall, it was about a 2 to 1. So I'm going to start with that and see if I like it as a color for her petticoat. There we go. It might be a little bit more, not just painting. We also have talking about food. Although I really can't talk about food right now because I'm still hungry because I only ate like half my breakfast because it's running late day, apparently. It's earlier out here on the West Coast, so I'm always like kind of rushing to get Kiri out and make sure she eats her breakfast and, you know, get myself ready for the stream. So that's a really dark, what we've got here is a really dark pink, but it's really pretty. I like it. Oh, okay. Oh, good, Zuo. So, yeah, Coobs, ask Zuo. He's got both. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I do not get lunch until after this. I eat earlier. So, all right, so let's try this. Let's block this in. Ooh, I kind of like that, actually. This is kind of the starting color I was going for. So this is a shadow, I'm going to say. With this sort of thing... With this sort of weathering, I would definitely start very dark and work up. Because, for one thing, back here, that's going to be up against the ship's prow. So it's going to be in shadow. So I'm going to be going for a darker color in general on the back, a very dark color. And then it feels intuitive to me to just work up lighter and lighter with my weathering as I get toward the front. Since she's on a ship, depending on how you paint her, if you paint her upright, like she's a museum piece, as figureheads are often seen nowadays... then you could just, you know, highlight and shade her normally. But... Oh, have fun, Laird Zephyrius. Yep, have fun. Yeah, water bases. Those are so awesome. I know I'm going to be doing one on Snake. Snack Lady. Do a little tiny waterfall. Practice for a big waterfall that I need to do. And actually, I got more work done. For those of you who follow my personal private stream and saw my Valkyrie model, I finally got the straps done on her shield last night with green stuff while I was hanging out with one boot. So I now have a conversion. I now have the Valkyrie with straps holding her reins for the shield that I adopted to put on her. So, yay, green stuff. So we can get back to her. I just didn't want you guys to have to sit through too much green stuff. Because I don't like to... Although I like to show green and I like to show how to work with it on my streams, I feel that if there's too much of it and not enough painting, it gets a little monotonous. So until I launch my sculpting stream, we're gonna mostly try to keep toward the painting end of things. But yeah, so now what I need to do is... I'm going to block it in. See, this is just wet blending, so I'm just pretty much smooshing both colors together while they're wet. I want it to fade toward a darker red back here. Yeah, actually, Ghost, I don't know that we have a link to it, but essentially my sobriquet is Painting Big. So it's twitch.tv/paintingbig. My Patreon is also the same way. My Patreon is actually what I depend upon for my income these days. And it is patreon.com/paintingbig. I do a lot of stuff about the paint line since I was the creator of the Reaper Master Series line. And for 15 years, I mixed every batch by hand and created all the colors. So I do a lot about the paint line on there, especially the $5 tier is for that. So, but yeah, so I do my own Twitch, and my own Twitch is usually on 4:30. It's 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and it goes usually till 6 p.m. Central Time on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I'm seriously considering adding Thursdays to that because it's been a lot more successful than I thought it was going to be, and a lot more fun. So yeah, you can find me on twitch.tv/paintingbig. There we go, twitch.tv. Sorry, brain cells. Need more caffeine. Where's my caffeine? I've just realized I brought my caffeine to the painting table with me today, which is where it belongs. Now, let's see. Yeah, you could use... I wouldn't use aquamarine. It's got a little bit of black in it, Gwen. I think Frosty Blue from Pathfinder is probably... Or it's... Frosty Blue is... I forget which line Frosty Blue is in. But yeah, Frosty Blue, as I recall, should be better. I need a color to highlight this with. What should we use? I think we're going to use an ivory. I think I want to go up, actually, not very much here. I want to go up a little orangier, maybe. This will make kind of a salmon color, so let's try this. I'm going to use stained ivory, actually, which is significantly lighter. It's very brown, though. So I'm going to see how this goes. I'm just going to mix some of my pink into there. And what this should do is give me kind of that faded highlight look where the wood is showing through the pink. And you can do this two different ways, guys. So there are two ways to get kind of that translucent effect on stuff. And this includes translucent cloth. You can sometimes get away with mixes. Like if your skin tone is the type of thing that plays well with your cloth color or whatever you're doing, you can mix the two. Like purple tends to work really good this way. Red works really good this way. Orange can work well. But if you've got a color that's kind of complementary, where if you mix it, it turns kind of grayish, like blue is really hard this way, and sometimes green, then you really have to glaze it. You have to do a thin layer of it. So here, because this is kind of a yellow and I'm highlighting kind of a pink with it, then I can get away with it, because these two colors aren't going to go gray or muted. They're just going to be, well, they're going to be kind of a skin tone, actually. That's kind of funny. So now I can wet blend these, kind of fade, get that fade I'm looking for. And then I can layer more when I get further along. What do we got? Oof. That's a lot of temperature. 104 to 107. Yeek. Yeah, no problem, Gwen. No problem. Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard it's been... I mean, I lived in Texas for so many years, and so I've been listening with much sympathy. I've decided that California cheats with weather, at least this area of California. Apparently Sacramento is a lot warmer, but which I didn't know, or I had been told but had forgotten. But where I am in the South Bay is just like California is like hitting the cheat switch. It's like 70s every day almost. Although we're supposed to get 90s this week. I'm looking forward to the last hot spell. Yeah, actually wet palettes are great for wet blending. trouble. I mean, I use my well palette all the time, but wet palettes are made for it. So, I mean, it's great because you can you've got all those paints open at once on a wet palette, so you can just grab what you need. Now, one thing I do want to do is I don't want it to be really, really bright red back here in the shadow. I want it to be a little bit muted out because, of course, it's in shade, right? So it wouldn't be really bright. It's only really bright when it's under the sun. So I'm going to grab probably some walnut, which is my normal. When I want a natural shadow, I reach for walnut brown, which is 9136. It's a very black brown. Pewter Rooster, I have a prototype, so I don't think I've actually got, like, the correct slot, but I'm sure there is something up here in the later iterations. Like, I'm sure it fits up there between her hair. Like, the curve of the keel probably fits right in here for her to sock it in. And I'm sure that later copies may have something else to affix it as well, and it's probably got a better connector than this. But this was, like, the first 3D print prototype that we ever got of this model. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's how you get it in there, but there may be actually more connection stuff than there is on this model. I am not certain.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and some of the connectors it looks like it connects at 3 points behind the hair, at her waistline and the back of her leg.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, and right now we don't have, like, so much here, because this is, yeah, like I said, this is one of the original print. So, it's not as much indicative of what you're going to get at the end. So my dog is making me nervous by wandering around. Because, just so those of you who are new, I have an elderly dog, and sometimes she has a tail emergency, and I have to drag her outside really quick. So if we get a 5-minute break, hopefully we won't during ReaperCon, I would cross my fingers. But Kiri's tail and butt function separately from what I would wish often. So I'm apologizing in advance if my dog has one of those moments, and we'll put on the be right back screen if that happens. She's making me nervous because she's kind of restless today, and that's usually a sign of imminent doom. Yeah, the Kiri emergency, exactly. We are used to this on the daily stream, but since a lot of you are new and just watching for ReaperCon, I felt you needed to be warned if Anne suddenly gets an alarmed look on her face. It goes, "Oh no, Kiri emergency," and rushes outside. Then that would be why. We blame Kiri. All right, there we go. I'm having to load a lot of red into this walnut. I probably started with way too much walnut, but I wanted to shift it toward red to start with before I started wet blending with it. So there. It's a little bit reddish now. Sounds like a mixing issue. Okay, hold on. Where's Winter Z's question? I missed it. Almost all Reaper paints have... That is absolutely... Actually, that's incorrect, Shadow Raven. Reaper paints use a multitude of bases. Vallejo limits it. Vallejo paint, I've heard, has only like 2 bases, maybe 3. Hold on. What is he? More paints than normal. A question about consistency in the bottle. Some come out in drops and others string. It's several things. Static electricity can really multiply. Remember that paint has a pH, and thus it has a positive-negative charge ratio. So let's talk science, everybody. Oh yes, Winter Z has got me on this now. All right, so your pH can vary depending on how much pigment you load in to the paint, and also how much what that pigment is. So, and it alters your pH slightly. So when you're getting stringing, you're actually experiencing like a slight static charge, which means that paint actually probably has a lot of pigment. So it may have less to do with the base. The bases are usually very, very neutral as far as it goes, because they want to give you a lot of leeway so that you don't get problems. Because when you shift too far toward acid or base is when you get chemical problems with a base. Watching my dog. So when you get an odd effect, that's usually chemistry. That's usually that your pH has twitched one way or the other. So bases usually don't affect that kind of stringing effect. Bases can and do strongly affect the consistency. So whether you get big blobby drops, or whether the paint is kind of thicker or the paint is kind of thinner. So your bases can definitely affect that. And Reaper uses almost a dozen different bases across the entire line, because liners are a different base, primers a different base. We use about 4 different colored bases. We use 2 different clears, 3 different clears, 3 different clears. Actually, there's 2 liner bases. I could go on and on. So So yeah, so when you get the stringing, it's actually probably the type of pigment and the amount of pigment, and I see it most often in highly pigmented reds, but it may appear other places as well. Yeah, so there you go. If you and it is a thing. I mean, liquids can have a positive charge. It's you know it's not entirely unknown. So yeah, that's what you're seeing essentially. We sometimes have problems with certain colors when we're pumping them for that reason. All right, let's do a fade up here. Let's do a fade here too. Now I'm going to try to do a light, and I'm going to do it mostly on the areas I think are going to get pummeled by the water. So I'm going to fade out the front. I'm going to fade out the front of this fold. Yeah, you know, I am the paint science girl, guys. If anybody in this world can tell you the science behind miniatures paint, I am she. Until they invent another one of me. Until somebody else like me creates a paint line and learns all this crap. Morning, Francis. I think I'm actually, much as I like my round brush, I'm going to switch to a flat because it's going to let me cover. When you're painting a big miniature, think about, and this is a really chewed up flat because I don't know where my other flat is, but flat brushes let you cover the surface a lot faster. Of course, you could also airbrush, but today I am wet blending, so I'm not airbrushing. I've never gotten really comfortable with an airbrush, so I'm looking forward to Aaron Lovejoy's class later today about the new Vex, because it sounds like it might be the airbrush for me. Just because there's, you know, you can switch the needle out without taking the tip off. And for me, the less stuff I have to do, the better, because I'm always really, really terrified of breaking my needle anyway. I'm going to put a little bit of a darker red in here. I do want this to suggest still that it used to be red. And if I'm going to do that, I do need to introduce a fair amount of that red and really take this pink dark. You have a static in the name. That's funny. Yeah, that's why I say it's a pigment issue more than a base issue, Zero. Although it also depends on your environment, right? If you have a drier environment, then you're going to be also more prone to that. It's a whole host of things. Just be ready for it. I mean, you usually can still see kind of the drop come out, as in my experience, so I'm going to just block in some more of this, and then we're going to take our really pale color and mix it in. I'm going to bring a little bit more of this pink in here. There we go. So I'm making kind of a wave effect here, trying to get my paint to blend nicely and quickly. Nice thing about wet blending is that you can set up a pretty decent blend and you can do it pretty quickly. So I definitely want red behind here though, like almost pure red, because if you look, this fold really sticks out. So the water would not necessarily hit this at all strongly at any time. Yeah, Francis. Well, you know, Francis, the miniature painting book, Anne's miniature painting book, is a goal on my Patreon. It's really high up there because writing all this stuff takes so long, and then producing photos for it also takes so long. But yeah, I could totally do. You're right though. There should be a chapter on Master Series paint in my painting book when I do it. We'll just start making an outline. My patrons and all my Twitch people, we can just start making an outline of Anne's awesome mini painting book. We'll just add to it as we get ideas, and then by the time we actually hit the goal and I can start writing in the thing, we'll have an awesome outline. It is a pretty pink, isn't it? It's a mix, Winter Z, of a skin color, bright skin shadow, which is actually a very cartoony triad. It's a very, the bright skins are meant to be a cartoony kind of paint skin tone. Some people like that, and also when you're painting a lot of chibis, you may like it, because it's a very saturated triad, it's very bright, and so it goes with bright colors, like you often will put on a chibi. And then Asmodeus Red from Pathfinder. So it's about a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 mixture, depending on how dark or light I want it to go. But it really is a beautiful pink, isn't it? I'm going to be highlighting it up quite a bit, and it's going to make it, the lighter I make it, the better it's going to go with this green. But this is an example, guys. I talk about this with color theory, because I used to teach color theory all the time at ReaperCon. But this is an example of how you can get the green and red in tune with each other without hitting the Christmas effect. Like using a dark green, using a washed out red, you can use those colors together, get the complementary effect, and not get Christmas. Now I'm going to try to block in some big shadows back here. I want red, and I want walnut, and I want to make it real dark all on the back, so that it's consistent with how dark it is up here, right? And I may need to actually add a little bit more walnut to really wash this out, because this color is staying pretty vibrant. And I want it to be a little grayed out a little bit, just a tiny bit. Then I can come in. Yeah. Actually, static overdrive, if paint cracks after drying, it's actually not enough water. In my experience with MSP, and we almost never get this problem anymore because we switched bases long ago, the bases that had a problem with that. But you're putting it on too thick and letting it dry too thick. Ideally, for a base coat, you're actually working with thinner paint, as thin as you can get it and still have it cover, or you put 2 thinner coats on. And that prevents that cracking effect. What you've done is essentially the top part of the paint dries faster than the bottom part of the paint because it's so thick, and then you get that crack. Because the underside is it's like mud, right? Where the top of the mud dries and the bottom of the mud patch is still wet, and you see that same cracking effect. It's exactly that same thing. It's physics. So the key is to use a thinner layer of paint. So like on this boot, if I pick up just a bit of paint, I am spreading it so thin, like really thin layer over this boot, for example. Let's get close so that you can see. I can almost see through it, and that's okay. I'd rather have that and then just go and put another layer on it and have this super smooth base coat that I want. That's perfect. I'd rather do it that way. So yeah, that's totally it. So no thick base coats allowed. Make sure you get yourself some thinner base coating. I'm going to put a little bit more red back here to at least bring this fold out. And again, we'll be going up with weathering as well. So I've got some serious color variance going on here now. And I need a little bit more red back here. I am getting a little bit too much paint in here, so I'm going to actually grab my brush. Wet blending, it's really easy to get too much paint, especially when you're using a bigger brush that can carry a lot of color, like a flat. So every once in a while you have to kind of stop yourself and dab off your excess paint. Let it dry. Stop putting paint in the same area. It's also a lot harder to get your wet blend to work if you've got too much paint loaded on the surface. It may seem counterintuitive. You may think, oh, I've got to have a lot of paint so that it stays wet while I blend this. But you actually don't. You need just enough paint and not more than that. Let's see here. I think I'll work on the front. And maybe I'll work on this fold. That fold hasn't gotten fully blended yet. I want to bleach it out a little bit. Bleach it out so that it's more like the front and get that paint color carried down over the front. Now, Master Series can be a little bit lower coverage in some colors, and so you may run into the fact that maybe with wet blending you're like, oh no, this is not ideal. But the key here, and I didn't stop and do it this morning, but if I had wanted a really good effect, I would have. So what I should have done is base coated this entire thing with my medium pink, and then come in and done the wet blend, at which point I would be perfect. I would have a base coat that was the right color so that I wouldn't ever get, my paint would never be too thin. I could actually wet blend with really thin paint, and I would never have to worry about coverage. And that's kind of the trick to getting really good wet blending with MSP. Is just put a quick base coat down first. You don't even need to have a really solid base coat. You just need to have something that works decently. So, all right, so that's good. And we're going to come and kind of highlight some of these. I just heard a burble in my ear. Somebody must have popped in.
That was me, sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm like, do we have an invader? Do we have a raid? Reaper Ogres, your primer stayed a bit sticky. Yeah, tacky primer is a chemical issue, static. And it depends on what primer you were using. It could have been a combo of primer and atmosphere, because primers, especially spray primers, are very prone to atmospheric effects. If it was a brush on, then it may have been a slightly different batch. But yeah, I never prime. I never prime my bones. I just wash them with hot water and a bit of dish soap. And rinse well and leave to dry, and that's all I ever do. I've just had so many unpredictable primer effects that I just don't do it, and my paint sticks fine. I mean, she's a bones, and she was just washed. I didn't prime her at all, and the paint has stuck just fine, and so I've got no complaints pretty much. since I can do that, that's what I choose to do. And it's sometimes, I mean, most of the time, brush-on primers are going to be just fine on bones, but you just never know. You just never know. Let's see here. Yeah, and Rat Mastery has a point. Stynal Res is supposed to be the best primer on the market. It's mostly an airbrush primer. And I have tried it, and it does indeed give a great prime. So you can always go to airbrush it. I just prefer not to. I've gotten in this habit of washing my bones, and it always works for me. So I'm like, oh, why change it? All right, so I wanted that to be a little bit better. So wet blending is nice because it lets you kind of set up your surface areas pretty fast with your midtone shadow highlight colors. And then you can just build out from there with your highlights, your details, your textures. I do want a little bit of dark and light variance through there. So that's a nice blend now. And we'll just kind of leave the back like that for now. So, all right. So now that's good. That's exactly what I would want. That's how the paint would likely fade. I am going to take this color and kind of spread it out now that we start weathering. So let's do that. Oh, yeah. Herv, this is the Bones 5 huge pirate ship that Reaper is doing. This is the figurehead that comes with it. It also has 2 alternate figureheads. But I actually had the original 3D print of this. Ron actually gave it to me and said, if you want to paint it, go ahead and take it, before I left Reaper and moved out here. So I've been enjoying doing the weathering to show the paint wearing away from the wood like it would on the ship's prow when the waves hit it and the wind and all the salt. So, yeah. Reaper gray, in case that matters. Yeah, our gray is very similar to our white, so interesting. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, everybody's mileage may vary. If you have a problem with primer on bones, though, I can tell you that you do not have to prime them. You can absolutely just use good old soap and water, and you'll be fine. All right, let's get our colors. We have some unusual colors for our wood. One of them is obvious. It's the driftwood brown. We grab it. And then I think desert sand is our highlight. Yes. So these are the 2 colors I'm using for the wood. Driftwood, because it's really made for this. I mean, it really is made to look like aging wood. So driftwood brown is what I use to kind of get the look of the wood coming through the color. This little bit darker brown that I've got going on. And then desert sand is what I'm using for the color of the oak, which is the wood that it's come. No, actually, you can see actually the gap that I filled with green stuff here. You can paint right over green. Once this troll started turning out really well on the stream, I was like, oh, I didn't bother to, fill any of these gaps. So one episode I took time and I showed people how to fill the gap. And I'm going to paint right over this green stuff. You can paint over green. If you really want to, you can put brush on primer over it first, but I'm just going to paint right over it. And the thing is that if I'm picking up the model, I'm never going to hit this area. So it's not going to rub off. It's not prone to rub off. So there's really no reason that you'd have to prime it for extra adhesion. The paint sticks pretty well to it as it is. So just sharing a bit of experience there. But yeah, I could, but I don't. Yeah, Dawn dish soap and rinse really well. Or palm olive works too, Bandar. Yep. Yeah, I usually just throw them in a plastic bowl with just a few drops of dish soap and really hot water and swoosh them around and then rinse them really well and leave them on a dish towel overnight. And they works great. Works great every time. I've never had a problem. So let's get our driftwood brown going on here. Oh, we are booking right along, but we got 45 minutes left, so I can do some serious weathering on this stuff. Now, what we're going to run into, which is going to be interesting, is I may not be able to utilize my driftwood brown as much, because if you look, the problem is that it's actually darker than this bleachy highlight I've been using. But it's still a good color. This is still a good color for my desert sand. So what may happen, since I'm using lighter colors down here on the petticoat, is I may need to mostly use my desert sand and not use my driftwood. The driftwood can come into play more when I'm here on the darker sections, but I think that the desert sand is probably the answer for the lighter sections. Yeah, I've never used Simple Green as like a cleanser for miniatures, so, good to know that it works. I prefer the dish soap method for myself just because it's fast. I've always got it out. I don't need to dig it out from under the sink or anything. All right, let's get a little closer here so that we can get up closer. Oh, all right. I'm gonna thin my paint. Always thin your paint. The main rule of miniature painting is always thin your paint. I did a class on that yesterday. And that class is preserved immortally in our VODs and in our YouTube eventually. So you can go and watch it at any time. I thin everything from my base coat on. I thinned these wet blending coats. I'm thinning these coats, these detailing coats for sure. I usually start around, if I'm base coating, you can do base coating straight out of the bottle, but I think you get better results if you thin our paint like 5 drops of paint to drop 1 drop of water, or 4 to 1. I wouldn't go any thinner than 4 to 1 unless you want to do 2 thin coats. Then you might get good mileage out of 3 to 1 paint to water. Kiri, can you settle? The doglet is all over the place today. I do not know what she's all about. Maybe David's playing computer games in the other room. My fault probably for leaving the door open so she can check on him all the time. Yeah. Oh yeah, stripping's a whole nother ball game. Simple green for any fragile minis. Anything that's metal. Metal can take a whole lot of more kind of toxic strippers, but let's see. I want a little bit more here. And my paint, since I didn't make gigantically big paint puddles, my paint's starting to dry just a little bit. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit of water to it. Knocked over rock troll. That was the thing that was falling on the floor. But it's bones, guys, so it doesn't matter. It's not going to get hurt. That's a great thing about bones minis. I can knock them on the floor with impunity. I'm going to add just a little more water to this. I want to have all my paints at a good consistency once I start doing this, in case I need touch-ups or a little bit of further detailing. So I'm going to add a little water to everybody. And then it's good to go. I use a well palette, as you've noticed. I do not use a wet palette. I do on occasion like play with my wet palette, like Rock Troll actually. We painted with wet palette just so I could show people like kind of how your style can switch up when you use a wet palette. But what I have found with the wet palette is that, oh, where did you go, Rock Troll? He bounced out somewhere. Oh, I'll find him later. He's hiding probably. But what I found with wet palettes is that they work much better with slightly thicker paint, whereas I really like to work with thin paint. Like you can see that this is really thin. You can see the palette through it, right? So since I like to work with thin paint, wet palettes don't work as well for me because the paper is usually going to wick fluid up into the paint, and that's kind of the point, right? But for me, that's a little bit too much because it really, really makes it... Is he trolling? Yes. Right, the rock troll is trolling by falling off my... Oh, there he is. Okay. Well, I know I'm not going to roll over him on my chair, so I'm pretty happy with him being down there. He lived there for a little bit. But yeah, so because I use thinner paint, I prefer the well palette. And when you use really brushes with very sharp tips like this, long pointy tips particularly, you may find your mileage increases. Oh, that's right. David went to the store. That explains why Kiri was looking for him. You may find your mileage increases a little bit if you use thinner paint with your really narrow brush tip. Whereas when you're using a wet palette, like a lot of the European painters, like Sergio will do this, they're going to use their paint full strength. They're going to put it on the wet palette, and they're going to use a brush that's thicker, that doesn't have this super ultra razor point. Because when you've got thicker paint, it's not going to come off this brush as well. And you want a brush with more body for it. So it's like a whole different kind of connected step of things, where if you work primarily with a wet palette, try a thicker brush rather than a thinner tip, and use thicker paint. And if you're working with if you like really thin paint, then work with a well palette and work with a brush that's very narrow, not thicker. So really, really, like pretty much all the brushes I was showing you're going to notice are very narrow. So like here, 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 here. Relatively speaking, these are all very narrow brushes. So they're not like big and plump. And so what happens then is that the thin paint actually works with them very well because it's not a super thick brush. I can keep control of it a little bit better. I just load up the tip just a little bit. So wet palettes can be fun, Wolfish, though. They can really make you loosen up your painting style. Like, I have to say, I've started using them more, but I use them for specific projects that I start in a specific way. Like with Rock Troll. If I'm going something where I want to paint fast and I want to cover a lot of ground and I want a lighting effect, I find that using a wet palette, this guy was painted with a wet palette and will be continued to be painted with a wet palette. This was ideal for a wet palette. Like painting those big spaces, you want to move fast. You want to, get your highlights and your shadows down. You want to move back and forth organically. Wet palette is wonderful for that. Same with his back. So I definitely do think that wet palettes are very useful. For me, though, it's all the style. I vary the style by how I'm starting the model. So if I'm doing that dramatic lighting, I'm more likely to use a wet palette, because I find that it enables that style of just moving very loosely and quickly. Whereas the well palette encourages me to slow down, thin my paint more, build up micro detail, which is not a bad thing, but it's a very different style, right? It's a different way of thinking about your painting. And so that would be the way I choose which one I'm gonna use. Master Series paints, just for those who are new and who maybe haven't used MSP, just so you know, they are formulated to be thinned with just water. You can certainly use certain thinners. Be cautious. Make sure that they interact well, but most modern acrylic paint thinners should work just fine with MSP. That said, they really are made so that you don't have to add anything other than water. MSP paints, all of them already have flow improver added. So the only time I ever add flow improver to my paint is when I'm doing really fine details, tiny eyeballs, something where freehand, something where I feel like I need that extra help, maybe a little bit more surface tension release. I recommend Distilled Rat Mastery if you are in an area where your water is problematic. So if you get water with a lot of heavy metals or minerals in it, like if you've got well water, if you've got really hard water with calcium deposits, if you've got anything, if you live in old Manhattan where they still have a lot of metal pipes, things like that, areas of the world like that, yes, you can certainly use either spring or distilled or even normal filtered drinking water. It's just that you don't want those heavy deposits in there. So I'm going to grab some of my walnut mixture and mix it with my pink, because I want a dark line here. I want some of these cracks to show up, but I don't want them to be very dark. Again, I'm going more natural looking. What's funny is that I'm mixing a bunch of colors that really look like makeup colors. It really does. These totally look like makeup colors to me. I guess I'm a girl, right? So I would know, but it is super funny to me. So now I'm just going to line a little bit down these wood grains. Bring them out, make sure I don't forget them. But I want to be, when you're dealing with the actual ship's figureheads, when you look at them, what you'll notice is that usually the wood grain won't be particularly seeable until a lot of the paint is stripped away. And then often it'll kind of discolor orangey or reddish, depending on the paint that was over it. It'll cling in the cracks and it'll leave a darker deposit there. So I'm kind of cheating a little bit here by using a bit of walnut mixed in, but that's more to suggest a shadow. Walnut mixed with colors just makes a nice natural shadow, and there would be a tiny bit of shadow in that wood grain, so I can get away with it. But as I go back further, I probably need to mix more my red with my walnut and get a dark red and put that in here, because that's where the paint would be clinging really hard to these little creases. And so you want those creases to look that way, they're still clinging to a bit of that paint. Let's see, trying to see where they are. Sometimes it's not so evident where those little wood grain cracks are. And you could choose, if you can't see them real strongly in the sculpt, you could freehand them, or you could just leave them blank, depending on what you want to do. Hello, David.
Hi.
In the house. David has a class later, don't you?
Yes, it's at 3 o'clock Central.
3 o'clock Central. So right at the end of my class.
No, there's one other thing.
Oh, there's one other thing. Oh, okay. Maybe I'm misthinking. But, all right, 3 o'clock Central is 1 o'clock here, and I'm 11. Right, got it. Okay. Time is hard, guys. When you're in one time zone and you're doing a con in another time zone, it gets a little confusing. At least for me. Oh, Kiri, what are you getting into? And get out of it. I should have closed the door, and I totally forgot to. The doglet is getting into things.
Oh no.
Oh no. Yes, if you hear echo, it's because David's mic wasn't muted. It's alright. We both teach from the same... We paint and teach in the same room, so... Alright, Kiri, stay in here. Particular favorite brushes that are must-have in my paint kit. I actually, it was asked, but at the beginning of the stream, Wolfish, so I am happy No, David's doing an OSL, so other source lighting, so glowing effects, essentially. He's actually using Snake Lady as his model for that class. But is it your bust painting class today, or is it the OSL?
It's the OSL class.
Okay, so you'll be painting Snake Lady, or watching him paint Snake Lady with a lighting effect, just like I did here. So it should be a fun class. David is really good at light, guys. It is his specialty. He is so good at light. So, but yeah, to get back to Wolf, hold on, let me grab my 2 brushes that I use for competition painting all the time. And pretty much that means every painting I do. Any of my commission work or my regular stuff or on stream. My 2 babies. The Vinci Maestro, here we go. There they are on screen. So these are both Kolinsky sable, and as I said earlier, the Kolinsky is the highest grade of red sable. So the top 2 grades, like red sable has like 15 grades, I think, and these are the top 2 grades. So these are grade 1 Kolinskys. They are the Vinci Maestro is my favorite brand, and the size 1. The series is 10, so that means the series defines the general shape of the brush, and the 10 in the Da Vinci is a general round. It's their standard round. So I like the size 1. Is a really narrow brush, and you're going to get the most mileage out of it if you thin your paint. The Raphael is a bigger brush. This is a series 8408, which I think is it's not their really full one, it's their finer tipped one. And it's also a size 1, but you can see it's such a huge difference. Different brush manufacturers are going to have a huge difference in what their size 1 or 0 or whatever it looks like, especially dependent on what the general shape of the brush is. But in general, Raphael runs a little bit big by my experience. Or maybe the Da Vinci 1 is just a weird brush, which has been my This has been my conviction for a while, actually.
It doesn't really fit with their other sizes.
Yeah, it doesn't. But it's just the perfect size for me. So because these are grade 1 Kolinskys, both of these brushes are several years old, and as you can see, they still come to a perfect tip. So I can do, even though this is a massive brush, I can do eyeballs and micro details with this Raphael, no problem. So that is what I use. Winsor & Newton Series 7 is the other brand that you'll see bandied around, and they're also good. And if you're looking for something about the same size as my Da Vinci 1 here, their size 0 is about the same size as my Da Vinci 1. But yeah, so I'm sure on the Reaper forums or around, maybe even the Discord, people probably talk about brushes. You can always ask also in our communities what people are using, why they like it. In general, though, remember the more narrow the brush or the more narrow the tip, the better it's going to be with really thinner paint. And the thicker the brush with the more robust body is going to be better for thicker paint applications. All right, back to work. Let's see, what am I going to use? I'm going to use my Da Vinci. Raphael, you've been getting all my time lately. Yeah, I mean, you're going to pay more for a Kolinsky Sable, Wolfhead, but then the plus side is that you're not replacing it every few months. It's, the tips never bend or curl. The most you might get is a poof effect, but that means you've gotten too much paint up in the ferrule here, and you can use brush cleaner to get that out. I use Winsor & Newton brush cleaner and restorer when that ever happens. I rinse my brush pretty compulsively, though. We've been talking about having me do a rinse counter one show, because I rinse my brush a lot. So, all right, I think I'm gonna blend that in a bit. Let's get real close here. Let's get super zoomed. So I'm working on the front of this, so you can see, and I've got kind of the lines going in the direction of the wood grain. I kind of used a mixture of driftwood and desert sand, but I'm gonna take my pink mixture and feather in the edges of those a little bit, because I wanted that to be a little bit more blended. I want the blend starting out just like I did up here. I want that slightly lighter kind of fade going on, like you see right there, then working up to the really higher weathered parts. But this is definitely a part that would get a lot of weathering. I'm going to grab my I think I need to thin my driftwood just a little bit more, though. I thin paint way down so that I can get more subtle effects and build up. It's a slower way of painting, but if you're looking for more naturalistic effects, it can sometimes help you. I would recommend trying both trying some faster painting with a wet palette, and then, you know, stepping back and trying some slower painting techniques and seeing what appeals to you as a painter, what feels natural to you. Everybody paints differently, and there is no right, there is no wrong. If you learn one thing from ReaperCon, it should be that there is no one way to paint. Everybody does it different. And if anybody ever tells you that you're doing it wrong, just like, that person does not need to be your friend anymore. Because it's not true. Definitely not true. That's the kind of attitude that I hate to see. Let's see, I'm going to put in some shadows here. Block in a little bit of darker color here and there in the cracks, because the red probably would cling to those cracks. So I can put in a little bit of darker color. Really bring out those little details. Chris Lewis did a fantastic sculpt on this. It's a wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, Crispies, because it's the same wood showing through. So I've got to use my same, my oak color, which is my desert sand, which is kind of a pale oak color, like I've seen when I studied figureheads for this effect. So I'm using that. And the thing is, since I'm using a lighter color here with this rose color, I'm going to have to mix probably a 50-50 of my sand and my driftwood instead of starting with the driftwood. The driftwood is unfortunately slightly darker than my pink here. So it wasn't working quite as well as a fader. So I had to do a quick mix. But it'll still read pretty well. There we go. Yeah, Zito Raven, it's nice to meet you. I also come from a 2D art background. I went to art school in Madison, Wisconsin. And I gotta say that I learned a lot more about technique from painting these figures than I ever learned in school. But yeah, you're usually a lurker. Well, cool. Absolutely. Can't stop, won't stop. All about it. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I love it when 2D artists also, like, kind of, or artists from different fields, like, pop in and go, oh yeah, this is awesome. Absolutely. Because you use a lot, like, you can use a lot of the same techniques. On canvas, you're just making it all up. Or on the computer screen these days, if you're working, depending on if you're working with traditional paint or not. But yeah, I kind of regret that I don't have the chops with oils that James Wapple does. Wapple is teaching in Camp Wapple pretty much all the ReaperCon weekend. But James uses oils a lot on figures, and I've just not gone back to that. I used to use oils a lot in college, but I haven't been brave enough to whip out the artisans. Although I do have a bust model that David pointed out is perfect for it, so I may stick my toe in the water and see if I hate it. So here we're fading it out, and because we're working against a lighter color, it's harder to see texture. Love to lurk. Yay! Yes, yes. Thanks for chatting. Even if you just come in and say hi, it's nice to see all the names. And Twitch likes it too. Like Twitch, that's one of the metrics that Twitch tracks, by the way, guys, is how many unique chatters you have in your chat. And so when you pop into a channel, even if you're lurking, feel free to say hi, because it really helps Twitch streamers get that metric up and, make them look better to Twitch. So can get them higher on search engine results. Twitch is tracking a whole bunch of stuff. So, and it also just makes us feel awesome that we have you there, even if you're lurking. So definitely pop in, say hi. Thank you, everybody. See, there we go. Well, it's nice to meet you, Backlog, and the only Blue Moose. I will believe that, and I love your name. And Fracture Lock, yes, with the Ed. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, I used to love oils when I was younger, but Dicey Guy, I have not. I've gotten so good at acrylics, which I used to hate. This is the great irony of my existence. Lurking today. Thank you, Paradoxical Mouse. And Jay is back, and Marty Mar. And Professor Kolb, hi. Yay, everybody. Thank you for all the hellos. Watch our chat numbers shoot up. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so Ungulate, this is, let's pass out. I'm trying to pass out, or zoom out. Let's not pass out on stream. That would be bad. So this is, I'm really liking how that's looking now. That pink against that green. Awesome. All right. So this is the pirate figurehead from Reaper's gigantic pirate ship from Bones 5. This is the earliest prototype. Hey, Red Links and Fairy Bars. It's good to see you all. And damn it, Daniel. Hello. Yeah, well, working with oils is going to be a lot different coups for sure, right? And thank you. Hi, Greasy Weasel. And God of Myth. Well, you are gods, so thank you for stopping in. We don't often get gods in chat. Yeah, I am a well palette. I'm a well palette aficionado because I'm a control freak, so I love to control the consistency. God of Myth. Hey there, JT. Your name is Mike. And you love to watch videos of paint literally drying. My job. Yes. Yeah, so it's wood ungulate. So since it's a figurehead, it's a resin cast, obviously, but it's meant to be wood. So that's why we've got all these striations on the model, and I'm painting it to look like a historic figurehead, which has been painted in oils, where the paint is leaching away and being beaten away by the elements. So I did this green on previous streams, and today I decided I wanted to try my accent color, which I thought would be a rose. So far, I'm really digging it. It's actually a faded red, so if you look at the back of the figure, you can see the reddish color that I think it was originally painted, and then I'm keeping that intact toward the back here, because the keel of the ship would come up and protect these areas. When you look at traditional figureheads that are mostly faded, have the paint mostly faded away, you can still sometimes see color, traces of the original color on the back side of a figurehead, because it hasn't been exposed to as much weathering, not as much salt and water and wind and sun. So the areas toward the front of this figurehead will naturally be lighter than the areas toward the back. And then also, the areas up top will get less weathering than the areas down low. So what will probably happen is, as I block in this figure, I will do texturing on each part. But at the end, I'm going to stop and take a look at it. I'm probably going to go back and really accentuate the weathering more as it goes down the model. To make sure that I have that obvious effect. I may end up stripping away a lot of this pink in the end. But I'm really liking the color right now, so I'm going to keep it for now. Yeah, like this would look... I don't know if this is the one they're going to put on the ship, though, because like I said earlier, this is one of the earliest prototypes, and it doesn't have the connection points that the actual model is going to have. So Reaper may get another one painted like with the ship. I expect whoever they get to paint the pirate ship is going to paint the figurehead their own, but this one I totally can pass off to Reaper when it's done, and they can use it as a separate example of how you could paint it. So I'm okay. Either way, it'll look awesome. Yeah, I really like the pink. This is also, as I mentioned earlier, an example of color theory, since it's red and green, but it manages to avoid the Christmas effect for several reasons. One, that this green is very dark. It also has a trace of blue and gray to it. This is actually ancient oak, which is a lovely, lovely dark green from the Bones series, 9412. Then I've highlighted it up by adding it in a little bit of Naga green to brighten it, and also then a little bit of driftwood to kind of fade it out a little bit and make it look like it's slowly wearing away. And then my highest highlights are the desert sand, which actually looks a lot like natural oak. But then down here, I'm highlighting it with actually stained ivory, which has some yellow in it, which is going to bring it up kind of fleshy colored or a little orangey, which again pulls away from the Christmas effect, right? If I only had the bright green there and the brighter red here, it would look very Christmas. But because I'm throwing in these other colors and effects and shading, then it is possible to use those two complementary colors together without getting the Christmas effect. It's yeah, something like that. Less than 4 months. Proctor reason to answer this. Was wondering if she could go into it or someone in chat could help. Agrexia and I didn't. Where are you? Proctor earlier mentioned using brush-on sealer to hide mold lines they may have been missed. How does that work? Oh, it's because the brush-on sealer is a little bit thicker, Agrexion, and it's also transparent. And it's also extremely smooth. So all these things together mean that you can kind of brush it into areas and maybe in several layers, and you can hide mold lines. This has been something that people have been using like gloss sealers to do for ages, because gloss sealers are usually thicker, but our gloss sealer is quite thin. So our brush-on sealer is actually a little better for this. It doesn't work with really big mold lines. And the place to use it is when you've got recessed mold lines. So mold lines that are kind of on the interior of a curved area that's curving away from you, where it's really hard to get a knife or a file in there. If it's really subtle, or you've got like, maybe you've got a big metal model and you've got some heat pitting on it, that's really subtle, you can use sealer, just at like 3 coats maybe, to let it pool in the place you want it to pool and just build it up, and it'll help you take down that mold line. Oh, okay. He said the gloss sealer will help too. All right, good. Well, Michael really likes using that trick. Me, I usually grab green stuff because I've gotten good enough with it now, and I will just green stuff over the area really quick. That's just kind of... Actually, I can show that on Mr. Horse. Mr. Horse is a project that I'm doing on my own, for my own thing, but the horse had a lot of filling and a lot of stuff, so I was just doing green stuff to hide. Like, there was a big mold line on the front of this muscle area. It was so hard to get off with the file, so I just grabbed the green and I did it. Same on the front of the neck. I was like, this is going to be a pain in the butt to hide, so I just went in and did that. So this horse has a Valkyrie on top of it, but we're getting there later. That's my personal project. Sometimes I cover that project on my my personal stream. which is twitch.tv/paintingbig. Okay, so there we go. Let me get down to wearing ketchup. Using brush on sealer to fill in bubbles, painting over it. Yeah, it needs a couple coats. I agree with that, Fairy Bard. Yeah. Yeah, almost any brush on sealer should work with Grixia. The nice thing about the brush on sealers, you can definitely you can purposefully make it thicker down in the pits that you're trying to fill in. Green stuff is really useful, Grixia. It has a learning curve. I've done a couple of streams on working with it. I've done more streams on working with it on my own stream when I was working on that Valkyrian horse. But yeah, I do a green stuff stream every once in a while because I think it's really valuable for the community. It really is very good if you need to like resculpt a detail, or like with horse, I didn't like his tail very much in some areas, and so I sculpted some extra hair. And then up here I had to fill in a gap, so I sculpted some extra hair up on top of his head for his mane, and used it to gap fill. So yeah, I think having kind of a basic, there's his tail too, I had to fill in there was a big chunk of mold sprue there that I had to correct texture over. So if you want to be able to correct little bits of texture problems, especially if you work with older models, like that's an older metal model, so it definitely had some artifacts that we don't find so much nowadays with all of the resin and the plastic. But if you get a badly molded part of a figure, if the rest of the figure is perfect, but you just have some little issues that didn't take in the mold very well, knowing a little bit of green stuff to disguise that and kind of like add back into the area is so useful. And I find it, once you get used to it, it's really, really fast, actually. What do we got, Rihanna? I didn't see your question. Let me look. Liquid green or kneadable? Kneadable. I have never heard anything good about liquid green, ever. I haven't actually used it, Rihanna, so do take this with a grain of salt, because, it could be very good if you learn how to use it. I kind of think that a lot of these tools in the hobby are like that, especially very specialty tools like liquid green stuff. But, I mean, you could do the same thing if you wanted a more liquid putty. Abe's Epoxy Sculpt or even Milliput are both putties that you mix together that you can then add water to and thin them down. And I find that those are really good for that effect. I've never worked with the liquid green stuff to see how it differs. But there are other products on the market that will do a more liquidy fill if that is what you want. So now we're going to bring up some of this light color here. I'm going to use the line. You always want your brush strokes to go in the direction of the wood grain if you're trying to do this stuff. And you want to even leave a little bit of brush strokes. This is what texture is all about. Why painting textures is so cool. You don't need to be able to do a smooth blend. You just need to be able to like give kind of an irregular speckly effect and make your lines go in the direction of whatever, like the weave of the cloth or the grain of the wood or, whatever you're doing. Stay consistent on that. And then you can create this textured effect. And it, like I said, does not require smooth blending. Smooth blending is in fact a detriment. Hello from Spain, Raven Day. Yeah, I hear liquid green stuff is just weird. It kind of, when I hear about it, it reminds me of what I used to hear about Squadron Putty, that green Squadron Putty that was terrible and killed your brain cells back in the day. Boy, I started hobbying a long time ago. I don't know how the world let that stuff exist, because it had toluene in it, and that will actually kill your brain cells when you inhale those fumes. It is not good. That's probably why I can't remember anything important these days. I'm lucky. My niece and nephew are lucky if I remember their birthdays. Although I did remember my nieces this time. It was good. So I'm bleaching out this area now. Anything that's really toward the front. And actually, I might take a little bit of my driftwood brown and paint it over this crack here even to make this crack lighter. Because I know that this is going to be taking the brunt of the ocean. And so it probably wouldn't have as deep of a discoloration in the crack. It would probably be bleached out like the rest of this wood in the front. So I can do that by taking, say, a little bit of my pink, a little bit of my driftwood brown, thinning it down, and just painting a glaze of it over this crack to make it a little bit more minimized. And fade it out along with everything else. So that way my cracks will get darker just like they do up here. They get darker when the miniature starts to face away from where the weathering effect will be really hitting it. Yeah, no problem, Rihanna. Welcome. I am the girl to answer questions about paint chemistry and paint application and things like that. And If you didn't know, I made the Master Series paint line. For many, many, many years, I created it, and I made every single batch for like 15 years. So I know just enough paint chemistry to make myself dangerous, and I can answer most of your questions, chances are. I'm going to fade out this area down at the bottom. That's definitely going to be bleached out. I do need to probably look at like this little weave that goes through the bottom of her dress, which looks like a ribbon with stitches across it. Probably extra decoration. I do at some point probably need to line that just so I remember, just to pick out the details before I paint all over it. So I'll probably grab my dark red here. I made this by mixing a lot of Asmodeus red with some walnut brown, which is a very black brown. And this will serve as a really good, it's actually really close to the color of red liner. It's like that. It's a really pretty red, actually. Top 5 paint favorites. Oh, Dicey Guy. Well, if you've watched my stream, you know walnut brown is one of them. Asmodeus red is definitely my favorite red right now. I think my favorites, I'm trying to think of my favorite purple right now. I think my favorite purple, what have I been using lately? See, I just have to look in my drawer because the colors that are right on top that I've been using a ton of. Usually I say Runic Purple. 9424 is going to be my favorite purple. My favorite, let's see here. My favorite blue these days is definitely 9419 Tropical Blue. I think I like, golly, I haven't been using a lot of greens lately. Ancient Oak is one of my favorites though. No, because I've been switching it up. Because actually my old favorite purple was 9239 Monarch. That's actually still one of my all-time favorite purples. And then there's the new purple, right? There's Orchid, the one that I made for the new Kickstarter. And Orchid purple is freaking beautiful. Orchid, you guys can't wait for this purple to be out. This is Orchid purple. It's just gorgeous. It's lovely. I got the idea from an exhibit of glass at a museum. I was like, I need that color of purple to exist. And so I just set about mixing it. It's very complicated purple. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, the Kickstarter, I think you can still, is our pledge manager still active on the Kickstarter? Disembodied Voice, whoever my disembodied voice is right now?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay, Justin. We've got our disembodied voice Justin back. We sometimes have John a little earlier. But yeah, so you could go and still make a pledge on the pledge manager for Bones 5 and you can get the brand new paint. And then you'll get it before anybody else. Because I'm not certain how long it'll release after we fulfill. And there's some other really great colors in that. Leaf Bud Green is also a lovely pale green. And Lotus Orange is a lovely color as well. Boop, these are little stitches. Boop, 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 boop. I need to figure those out. So sometimes I'll go through like that and line. Now, as you can see, this is not a very strong line. Like, I'm not making a really, really dark line. I'm more just using, like, my red shadow color to line these. Because, again, I want it to be more naturalistic. So I'm not going for really cartoony. I'm not going for a really dark, heavy line. One place I might go for a darker line, like with my walnut, would be, like, up here under, if I wanted to block in some dark shadow in here. And since it's the underside of something, it's totally legal to do this because it's not really supposed to be anything you look at. So blocking it in really dark just makes the eye kind of glance over it. So I'll leave a little bit of a rim there, but I might go with a darker shadow there just to bring in that really hard demarcation line between these two surfaces. We'll see, we'll see. Oh, let's see here. You've had enough paints frozen. I know, Shadow Raven. I feel for you. That's fine. Yeah, I just answered my question. All right, good. I love accidentally answering questions, Agrexian. It happens a lot. All right, so yeah. So you see, that's more of a subtle shadow there. Now, I don't know what I'm going to make these little laces. I may very well make them like, I was going to go with a dark blue up here. So I may make it dark blue just to tie those areas together. Or if I make this a pale green, probably a dark blue is better though. And the reason is you always want contrast, right? And even on ships' figureheads, they did this. If they did a figure in a dark green dress, she'd have a light green sash, for example, just to make everything stand out on the model. So this is an artist convention that's been around for a very, very long time, because contrast is really what makes things look great. And it's nowhere more true than on figures that are small, like a 28mm, like Miss Juliana here, where I went with the pale yellow apron, which is just blocked in, because I wanted it to stand out against like the medium colors in here and the dark color here. So you can see I'm alternating light and medium and dark across the model, and that makes all the details stand out better. So contrast on light and dark is very important to, and of course you could also do that with the way that light is falling on the figure, which, you know, you're going to see probably in my boyfriend's bust class tomorrow. So go and sign up for that if you haven't already. He's going to be painting a bust, and he's going to be painting it really fast, and you are all going to be amazed. But his light-dark contrasts are really, really awesome. So, hey there, Kiri, are you finally going to settle down? The dog has been so restless today. Restless dog is restless. Some of these details are also a little bit shallow. And so it's good to kind of get a little bit of lining in there so you don't lose them as you're layering your paint down. If you start putting a darker color over this, you could have a harder time remembering where it goes. But you can see there's not a whole lot of detail there where it goes into the cavity. It could just be the way that the sculpt kind of twisted it in ZBrush. Could be anything. Could be just casting artifact. But yeah, so you want to kind of block these things in so you don't lose them. If you think that your lining is a little bit too harsh when you go to actually paint them, you can always paint over it. That's the lovely thing about acrylics that you don't get to do with oils, is you can, if you don't like it, paint over it. And if you're using relatively thin paint from the get-go, you can paint over it with at least a few layers and it won't lose any detail. Yeah, so a little... The other thing that lining is really good for is it builds your brush control. So like having to do these thin little lines can help you do things like eyeballs later. And little belt buckles and stuff like that. All the little tiny details that are always difficult when you're starting out and you don't have a lot of brush control. But lining is a really good exercise to get that control that you need. And doing a lot of lining will absolutely build your brush control up in like no time at all. Like a week or two. I have watched it happen. What's up, Kiri? Trying to play with your bone and you're almost falling over? Elderly dog is elderly. So silly. But everybody wants to paint their ship differently. Yeah, Winter Sea. Actually, there is one. I used it. It's on my Patreon. I did a thing on how to improve your brush control faster. And I used Caphryxis, the copper dragon. Because his scales are very much diamond-shaped, so they're crisscross. But they have just enough variation to make it, you know, not super easy. So you could easily just, you know, keep lining his scales. And, you know, and he's a smallish dragon, but he's still a dragon. So he gives you a lot of area. So that is a model that I recommend practicing lining on. But you could also use anything like a lot of the fire giants, for example, have a lot of diamond shapes also. So like working on lining across here, these are great because they're big and blocky, so they're not really tiny details, and you could just work on doing a nice relaxed brush stroke and lining all the details, you know, and lining around your little scales down here, just two little lines. You know, really what it's doing is it's building up your brush control with repetition. There are a couple more tricks to it, like always make sure your hand is comfortably braced and things like that. Your brush stroke should be comfortable for you. Stuff like that. But I go into it. If you're on my Patreon, you can go take a look. If you're not on my Patreon, then that was a quick summary. Alright, so I've got some of that defined then. I don't feel as bad. I don't think I'm going to lose that as much. I do want to do just a little bit more lining, and then we'll go back and do more weathering. Oh, actually... Oh, yeah, Anne's Patreon. Oh, there we go. There's my Patreon. Thanks for linking it. Sometimes the bot takes a little bit long. It's patreon.com/paintingbig. It is actually, it's my primary source of income. It's what I do for a living, guys. This is what I do for a living. It's crazy, isn't it? Anyway, thank you everybody for like coming in. We're at 5-minute warning, aren't we, Justin? Justin is gone. I have no disembodied voice. Oh no, no disembodied voice allowed. So all right, now that I've realized that we're almost done with the stream, I'm going to show you guys what I've done. So we did some wet blending today. We did some lining. We showed the weathering and how it was set up here. We messed around with colors. We talked about, shading. We got a lot in today, actually. And I've started, and I really love this pink. Let's go out and take a look. I'm still debating the color of the shirt. I really, really am. I really love this green and pink, though.
By the way, Miss N, it's not really a 5-minute warning, but more like a 2-minute warning.
More like a 2-minute warning. All right, that's what I thought. Well, I was just wrapping up, Justin. So here we go. So I will be continuing our guys. If you do have time to tune in regularly at this time of morning, we do this every day, every weekday on Reaper Miniatures Twitch. So twitch.tv/Reaper Miniatures. And I am here every day, and we're going to be working more on her. We're going to be working more on Rock Troll. We're going to be working more on Fire Giant. He's awesome. We've got to finish the basing still on Snack Lady. And I actually have a guest dragon that was going to make an appearance. I had forgotten that I had him. His wing broke, so I had to green stuff him. But remember this guy, Gemstone Dragon? We're going to work on Gemstone Dragon too. He's officially on my Reaper Pro Tips shelf now. So yes, we are. That's what we're doing. So show up, hang out every weekday from 11:30 a.m. Central to 1 p.m. Central, and I'll be here. So I hope you all have a great day. I hope you enjoyed the stream very much. I am Anne, once again, from Reaper Miniatures and Disembodied Voice Justin, signing off. Please enjoy the rest of the content this weekend. I'll be hanging out here and there in the painting tables. All right? See you all.
Thank you guys very much. Stay tuned. We're going to flip the stream back over, and we'll have some fun stuff for you here for the next few minutes before we get the next panel started, or the first panel of the con started. So thank you guys very much.